Hello, everyone, and especially those who were not able to join us today for our Stamp Club meeting. Today, we are going to be focused on a particular stamp set that I will share in just a minute and some of the new in colors, but also kind of talking about how to put together a card design that you can replicate pretty quickly. And for me, this is one that I really enjoy, meaning having a design in the back of my head that I can make multiples of in just a few minutes. It's such a great feeling of accomplishment when you can sit down and fairly quickly have 4 or 5 cards done that you're really proud to send out. One layer cards for me are some of the most challenging because when you look at a one layer card, we know what that means. There isn't really any kind of additional pieces of paper, or in some cases, not any kind of embossing, but it still gives an interesting design and one that allows the eye to go from different spots so that it's still interesting to look at. So I had an idea that I was going to use this stamp set. It's a new one in the annual catalog, Gorgeously Made. For those of you who know me well, and there are many of you who do, you know that I love stamp sets that have kind of a grungy background and just something that you can make your own by using it in different ways. And I was really attracted to this stamp set for the grungy stamp, the one at the top, and also this one at the bottom that has the partial words. The other thing that I love about the particular products that are related to Gorgeously Made is there is the absolute coolest set of dies. This one attracted me a lot, and I'll show you what that does in just a minute. And the next project that I will do at our next stamp club, I'm going to use these dies and do some really fun and funky things with them. And they're also called Gorgeously Made. But I just wanted to really briefly, and then I'm going to start the card. I wanted to briefly say, if you have a design in your brain and you want to get it onto paper, give yourself some grace, because you may go through a couple of iterations until you find something that you like. Don't feel like you're wasting paper or wasting ink. I used to, but I've gotten over that because this process, and you're seeing some examples of what I did before I landed on the card that I'm going to show you. This is what I went through. I grabbed a piece of paper and I started using the stamps that I just showed you and some of the new in colors and came up with a design. I didn't particularly like the lemon lime twist that I added over here, so I said, nope, don't want that one. Then I went to another version and started again. And this will show you what that really cool die does. It is just amazing. And then this is another die in this set where it looks like it's a torn piece of paper. But again, I just kept going, another iteration. Then I thought, okay, what if I put some ribbon around it? Another iteration. And then it was, well, let's see what I can do with maybe moving the design down. And I liked this one enough that I actually put some embellishments on it. So that one was okay, we're getting there. Then I twisted it into a landscape card and just did a little different. And it still, there was something that was not quite what I wanted it to be. And then I landed on this. And the things that I like about this card I like the one little piece of a die cut. I thought this ribbon, and I don't use ribbon like this very much, but I thought the ribbon added a little bit of imperfection. I don't particularly care that that isn't straight or that isn't straight or this is fraying. This is meant to be a kind of an eclectic looking card. And this is the one that I'm going to replicate. So you're asking yourself, why has she continued to talk about what she did for the last, couple minutes on this process? It's to just say, let yourself be creative. And what I'm going to do with a couple of these you know, this wasn't my final design, but I can still use this. I can put this on a card front, maybe put it onto a piece of boho blue or something. And I can put another sentiment right in the middle. I can use what I have created and make them into other cards. They're just not the design that I'm going to land on to do these multiple cards. And the other thing is I made this one on a card base. And even if I don't particularly love it, I can cut this. I can put this into my paper trimmer and trim that off, trim off a little bit on each of the edges, and I'll have a great card front that I can use on another card. So don't think that you're wasting your time, your resources when you play. You're landing on something that you like. So give yourself some grace. So what we're going to do is we're going to make 4 of these. And I'm going to kind of show you what I'm going to do that. We're going to look at the materials. I have 4 card bases that I have already cut out. They are just basic white and they're standard A2 size. So I've got those all set to go, and I'm going to put those in a pile. I did cheat because I knew what I was going to be doing. So I have my ribbon already set. So yes, I have done some prep, but the stamping is going to be something that I'm going to be going through in just a minute. I also did my little sentiments, and this is one of the dies from the set that I showed you, the Gorgeously Made dies. So I've got those ready. Did not take long to do those. And the one other thing that I did prep is I have the little die cuts, the foliage die cuts, and these are also from the Gorgeously Made. So yes, I took a couple minutes to get things together, but I'm going to now do the stamping. So when I stamped this card, I did need a mask right down at the bottom. And where I have the line, if you want to call it, where my stamping ends, that's where I'm going to put the ribbon. But I didn't want the foliage to go underneath the ribbon, and I used a mask, and that will make better sense in a minute. And what I'm going to do is I am going to take each of the card bases, and I'm going to stamp the same thing on each base, and then I'll go to the next base. So it's a production line. And the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to add the Moody Mauve, which is that one foliage piece in the middle. I'm going to do that first. And then I've got a little Moody Mauve down here. And I'm going to talk about that in just a second. But I'm going to do that on each of the 4 card bases. And then I'll do the second step. It's just easier for me. This is my mask. And this is a 1/4 sheet of basic white. It can be anything that you have that is at least long enough where you can move it around as I'm going to mask off the area where you want your design to end. And I'm going to bring mine, actually I'll do it the same way I did the other one. I've got a piece of graph paper, and it's just so I can attempt to get my line straight on the bottom. It really isn't necessary. And I've got a pencil line that you might be able to see on the row where I sort of want to mask this. So I'm just going to put my 1/4 sheet of paper at the bottom, and I'm going to grab one of the new in colors. This is the Moody Mauve, very pretty color. And off camera, actually I'll try and bring it in camera, I'm going to ink up that entire Moody Mauve stamp. And for the purposes of the stamping that I'm going to do on here, I just need to ink it up once. And I'm just going to make sure that the stem on the bottom is a little bit below my mask. And I'm going to go ahead and stamp that. I'm going to do a second generation as well. And when I do that second generation, I'm going to make sure that the amount of the stamp that I'm putting onto the card is not as tall. And I'll tell you why in a minute. So I'm just going to move it down and I'm going to twist it a little bit so it doesn't look exactly the same as what I just did. And I'm going to give that a nice little push. And I've got two intensities of that stamp. Let me tell you why I did, or I said, don't use the top of your stamp when you do that. So let me grab a piece of cardstock. Let me just grab it. I've got one over here on the side. Pretend that this is the front of the card. It's only one layer, but we're going to just pretend for a minute. So if I come back in and I do what I just did, and I'm going to purposely do it the opposite way. I'm going to, the first generation, so this is fully inked, I'm going to hold it down a little bit and I'm going to ink it up or stamp it. And then if I push this up for my second generation, look what happens. I've got this blob in the middle. I don't want that. And the reason that that happened was when I inked the first time, where there's that overlap of the paper, that ink did not go anywhere. It stayed on the stamp. So when you do the second generation, make sure that you're making your image visually smaller. That way you'll always have the same amount of ink on the second image that you're stamping. So if I look back over here, the second image is fully in that second generation. So just be careful. And we're quickly going to do the other cards. So it's nothing magical. And what's kind of fun about this is once you start on this, you really don't have to think. And I like not thinking, because if it becomes more automatic, it's just a little bit easier. So I'm going to grab that piece of paper again, and you're going to see how quickly we can put 4 of these cards together. They're not going to look the same, but they're not meant to look the same, because every time you do this, you're going to hold the stamps a little different. You're going to maybe add a little bit more or less ink. Great. That will make each one look unique. You don't really want them to look like you just put them into a printing press and knocked them out. What I'm also finding with this kind of technique is that I'm getting much more comfortable with the acrylic blocks. And again, for those of you who know me well, you know that I really like stamp positioning tools. I use them all the time. And this kind of technique is one where you're just moving, you're creating, it's liberating. And again, it's so much more quick to get these kind of cards done if you want to just run through them like this. So I'm almost at number 4. And think about how quickly you could put some cards together for, let's say you've got a ton of birthdays coming up, or when we get to the holidays, if you have a lot of Christmas cards that you want to put together. All right, so we just did 4. They're each going to look a little different. That's fine. So now we're going to go back and we're going to add the second. And for all intent and purpose, I am done with the Moody Mauve. So I'm going to go ahead and close that up. And the second color that I'm going to use is Wild Wheat. And for the Wild Wheat, what I'm going to try and do is put a full inked image on the left, a partial full inked image on the right. And then I've got a couple places where there are some second generations of those inks. And again, I'm not going to overthink it. I'm just going to stamp, and I'll bring each of the cards that we've already started back in, put them pretty much at the same place. And since I'll have that ribbon, I don't have to get it perfect, but I'm trying to get my mask about at the same level so that when I do put the ribbon on, it will look intentional. And I love this stamp. I don't know what it is about this stamp, but I really, really love it. And I'm just going to try to get it all on the card. And then I'll come down here and give number 2. And I may be able to get a third generation out, but again, I'm pulling that stamp down even further. So I'm just going to get the top of it right there. All right, so that's number 1. Bring back in number 2. I'm really anxious to do some multiples like this when it gets to the holiday. And I've seen some sneak peeks of some of the new online exclusive products that will be available in August. And there is one that has grabbed everybody's attention. It looks like a toy truck and it is a punch. So I'm super anxious to see what that is all about. I think that would be very, very cute for the holidays or for a little kid's birthday. And before we know it, we will be making cards for the holidays. In fact, we probably should actually start that sooner than later. And I feel like we say that every year. And I need to get going on that. So that's number 3. And then we'll do number 4. Now, if you have a mask like the one that I'm using that is made from cardstock, it's going to last a while, meaning that the ink is not going to bleed through. Sometimes when I use masks, depending upon what I'm using them for, I will use copier paper, and copier paper will tend to really absorb the ink, and they're not going to last a super long time as a mask. So just be aware of that. All right, so that was the first pass of that color on the cards. We're going to come back and we're going to do one more. And the reason I'm doing the one more is it's a full inked stamp of the same stamp that we used here. But the first time we did it, which is what we just did, we did generation 1, generation 2, generation 3. We're just going to do generation 1 on the second pass. So I'm just going to bring these cards back in and kind of line it up. Again, it's not critical. Obviously, move the mask over to the other side. And I'm going to ink up that stamp. And put it on. So that's number 1. Now, if you only do one generation of ink, make sure that you go back and you re-ink your stamp, because you are not ever going to get the stamp at the exact same height on 2 cards. And if you don't re-ink, you might end up with something that looks like that, and you don't want that. So make sure that you re-ink if you're going to do another first generation on a different stamp, on a different card. And this is going to be number 3. So we'll go ahead and put that in. And I love how these colors work together. The card is going to have 4 of the 5 new in colors. I only left out Pebbled Path. I just didn't think it worked with this design. It doesn't mean I don't love the color. I do. But I wasn't really excited about adding it into this card. All right. Okay, so we have 4 card bases that look something like that at this point. And now what we're going to do is we're going to add in a little bit of boho blue, which I truly think is my favorite new ink color. I have used it a lot and it is just stunning. So there are two stamps that I am going to use with the boho blue. One of them is the stamp that has the partial words. Super fun. The other one is the piece that is the grunge with the background dots and the vertical lines. It is a very imperfect stamp, so it lends itself well to what I'm going to use that for. And I'm first going to add in the words, and I'm just going to do that fairly quickly. I don't need a mask for this because the image is one that I can really see when I am putting it on the card. But I am going to control the intensity of the blue. I'm going to stamp it off. I don't want it that dark. So second generation, third generation, then I'm going to ink it up again, stamp it off, and I'll do a second generation, a third generation, and then I'm going to do my best to get a little bit more right in the middle. And I'm going to go ahead and bring in card number 2, stamp it off, and do the same thing. And don't, at least for me, don't go crazy enough that you make it exactly in the same place. Just be kind of free with it and allow yourself to add it where it makes sense. Because if you look at the stamps that I've already added, they're not exactly the same on each one of these cards. So it might be that I'm going to do some of the words higher or lower and just make it look a little different. And then I've got number 4 here, and we'll add the words the same way. Stamp that off. Generation number 2, stamp it off. All right. So we have 4 card fronts that are all at the same level. And now we're going to come in and we're going to add this fun stamp. When you use stamps that are long like this, I really recommend that when you ink them, you turn them over so that you bring the ink to the stamp rather than taking the stamp to the ink. You will get much better results for a few reasons. You will be able to control the ink better. You'll be able to see it, and it doesn't move around, so you're not going to get the halo effect that you sometimes do when you bring your stamp over to the ink. And what I'm going to do on this is I'm going to do my best to put kind of a border on the bottom and a border on the top. And because this isn't perfectly straight, I don't need to worry if I get it exact. So I'm going to get it at the bottom. Then I'm going to intentionally just tap the edge of this stamp because I have a little bit left to do. So I'm going to tap that and come in and stamp it. Turn it over. Ink this up. And this is on the top of the card, but I have turned it completely upside down. Off camera, I'm just tapping the edge of that stamp and coming in. And there's my border. It's not going to be perfectly straight. I don't care. That's fine. Going to grab the next one and do the exact same thing. So again, one layer cards are meant to show dimension with a single layer so that you're not doing a lot of different die cuts or ribbons, twines, things like that. And there are some amazing techniques that you can use to do gorgeous one layer cards. And they can be very tricky to do. But this is a pretty simple layout, and these stamps just lend themselves to a really fun and eclectic design. All right, so that's number 2, top and bottom. Go to number 3. These are also the kinds of cards that I will drag out into our living room. And if we're watching a show where I can pay attention, but not have to stare at the screen the entire time, this is the perfect kind of project because I can hear the story, but I can also get some cards made, and I don't need to bring out a lot of supplies. That's one of the reasons that I typically don't bring a lot out to the living room, because I end up bringing everything from this craft room out to the living room, and then I have to bring everything back, and it's just a little painful. So number 3, and then we've got number 4. So when at the beginning I was talking about going through and figuring out your design, that can take a little bit of time, but it should be a fun process, not one that you get frustrated with. And then once you've figured out your design, grab the supplies that you need and do a little prepping if you need to, because I kind of cheated where I've got a few die cuts, one with the sentiment and then one with some foliage. And that can be a production line as well. You know, just get out some paper, do your die cuts, get out some scrap paper, do your sentiments, and then you can have everything ready to go when you're making your cards. So we've done the stamping. We've got 4 card fronts that look pretty much the same. They're not absolutely identical, but if you look at a pile of these, you would say that they were intentionally done to look like they're the same design, which they were. And then I'm just taking 2 seconds here, and I've got my chamois. And I'm just very quickly getting the ink off of the stamps that I have used. And I'm going to leave them on the blocks because if I want to do some more, they are all ready to go. All right. So the colors that I have used so far on these cards are Moody Mauve, Wild Wheat, and Boho Blue. And you can see how that fits into the design. There is one more color that I did want to bring into this card, and it is the gorgeous Copper Clay. This may be my second favorite of the new in colors. I just think it is very unique and very rich. And what I did for the Copper Clay to add it to the card is I used it for my sentiment, which I guess is cheating a little bit, but I did want to bring it in. And I wanted it to look just a little different than that Moody Mauve. You're a Great Friend is one of the sentiments in the stamp set. There's some other ones, the thank you and the hello. And I decided to use You're a Great Friend. So I just got a piece of scrap white, basic white cardstock. stamp that sentiment. And I really, again, I love that color. I like the font too. It's kind of, to me, like an old-fashioned typewriter in a way. It's just very structured. And then I used one of the dies. This is the die. And I cut that out using that die. And this is a cool die. It is a jagged edge. The top and the bottom are straight, but each of the edges is kind of, looks like it's torn. It's imperfect. And imperfection is definitely the key in this particular die set. This one is super fun. This is the one that I used when I cut this piece. And it's a jagged edge. So when you use the die, it's going to give you a jagged edge. Super fun. And the die here is the one that I used on the top. It's wide enough that you could use it on a landscape card, and it gives you the perforation, and also it looks like you tore out of a notebook. Very cool. Very, very fun. And I definitely will be using that in a future project. But these are just some very unique dies and ones that absolutely caught my eye. Something a little bit different. But let's get back to the card because we've only got a couple more things to do on our multiple cards and they will be all done. This is the pile of our 4 cards. And this is the beginning of the piles of the pieces that I'm going to add. So when we look at the final card, I've got one little die cut that's here. I intentionally did not glue down all the edges. I wanted it to look a little organic. So I did put some adhesive behind the top leaf and behind the bottom stem. And what I also did, because I didn't want it to be too long, is I got a pair of scissors and I just measured where I wanted it cut off. So I'm just going to cut off a little bit of the stem, and I'll just do all 4 of these while I'm here. Again, getting into production mode. So this is where I'm cheating and actually now going away from an absolute 1-layer card, but I'm going to call it close enough because there's really not a lot more than the sentiment and the foliage that I'm adding to this. So I've got a couple glue dots. Don't need to necessarily use glue dots. You can use whatever kind of adhesive you like and just put a little bit if you're using a die like this or something else. And however you're going to get that onto your card. And I'm just going to sort of visually make sure that it's in the middle of the other foliage and plop that down. This is a really nice die as well. If you look at the leaves, part of them are cut and part of them are kind of embossed. So it's a really interesting combination. And there's another really nice die that comes with this set. That's another foliage that is very, very pretty as well. So that's number 2. Glue dots and I don't always get along. And I know I've said this before. They definitely have their purpose, but I tend to find them everywhere when I use them. My husband finds them everywhere. And not only the glue dots that won't come off the wax paper, but also these little circles of wax paper end up absolutely every and anywhere. So I do like them. but we have a kind of love-hate relationship sometimes. And I've almost got number 4 on, and then we'll go to the last part. So as you can see, if you can, get the pieces together and just figure out your production line, you can put multiple cards together very quickly. What's also nice about multiple cards is if I had to walk away from this right now and come back at another point, I can do that, no problem. It would be very, very easy, and I would know exactly where I need to pick up. All right, so now we're at the point where we can add our ribbon, because we're going to add the ribbon. Then we're going to put the sentiment on top using a couple of dimensionals. A ribbon like this, you've got options. You can use glue dots and put it down. That will work. You can use liquid glue. That will work. Tear and tape is an option that I'm going to use for this. Couple reasons. It is very permanent. It is also very quick. So I'm putting the tear and tape pretty much on the line that I created when I did the mask, because that's where I'm going to put the ribbon. And I don't know exactly the length of the ribbon, so I'm intentionally going to cut it a little shorter on both sides, because what I want to make sure that I have is room on either side so that adhesive doesn't show. So it's not going to stick to anything. And again, I'm going to do a production line. I'm going to add the tape, and then I'll come back and put the ribbon. And tear and tape was one of those things that years ago, I don't think I appreciated how easy, quick, and reliable this adhesive is. And it's also pretty inexpensive, because when you get a roll like this, unless you use it on almost every project that you do, it is going to last and last for quite a while. So it would really do quite a few of these cards. And here's our last tear and tape. So I'm just going to put that down. And if I don't get it straight, I'm really not going to worry, because my ribbon is going to be wider than the tape. Now, tear and tape, you know this, you need to give it a nice little burnish. And I'm going to grab my bone folder. This just helps get the wax paper up. And you can also grab take your pick tool. This is a great tool. It has multiple ends in it. I'm just going to turn that over so I've got the little pokey thing, technical word, and I'm going to use that to get the wax paper moving. And I will get my wax paper exposed, and then I'm going to kind of center this. I'm looking at it from the side and trying to get it sort of straight-ish, and just go ahead and put that down. So there's one. Do number 2. So a good burnish. Get my little pokey tool. This is a godsend, because all you need to do is get the wax paper moving, and you will be able to get it off pretty easily. Again, I am sort of looking underneath the ribbon to see that it's about even. And then I will put that down. And I kind of like this imperfect edge, gives a little bit more character. Now we're on number 3. This one's being stubborn, of course. You have to have one stubborn one. There we go. Get on the ribbon. This is the new ribbon as well, and it is really nice. It has a texture to it that I I don't know if you can see it. I'll bring it closer to the camera. It has a really pretty texture, and it's really, really easy to use for tying bows, and as we're doing with just a strip of ribbon. I'm going to take that wax paper off here. And that one cooperated. And put that down. And it does come in all the new in colors. All right. So we have our ribbon on. I'm going to go ahead and put the sentiments on. This is the next step. And I'm just going to add a couple of dimensionals. The dimensionals will work on top of the ribbon. So you do not need to worry about the adhesive not attaching to the ribbon material. They definitely will. And I'm just putting 3 on each of the sentiments. As usual, putting a dimensional in the middle. Don't want that to sag. And then I will just pop these on. And then we'll just put on our embellishments after this. The mini dimensionals would work on this as well. And I'm sure you know that there are also dimensionals that are black, and they come in super handy when you are making a design that has some darker colors and you want to hide your adhesive. And I'll put that down and then get it as straight as I can. Number 1. What you can also do with multiples like this is if you get to the point that we did before putting the sentiment on, so when we had the ribbon on, you can have these sort of as a little stash. And if you have a particular occasion, a birthday, a get well, thinking of you, anything like that, pick a sentiment and get your sentiment together, and then you can just add it to your ribbon. And you've got a great design for any occasion, and they're all ready to go. I have a little stash of die cuts that I've done in different colors. Maybe I had some extras from a project. I have some foliage that I've cut out of different cardstock, and I just keep it right by my craft table. And that way, if there is a card that needs, just a little bit of bling, and I don't have anything particular that it needs to have, I want to straighten that one up a little bit. I can just go into that stash and I can grab something and use it. So it's a great way to just have a little extra on hand. And I'm just going back and kind of checking these before I'm completely committed. I'm just looking to see if that straight line on the bottom is fairly straight against the bottom of the card. And those ones look pretty good. Okay, 4 cards. Last thing, bling. We need bling, right? Of course we do. These are the new in color dots. I got these because, frankly, I wanted to just see them in person. They're really cool. And what I like about them is a couple of things. Just going to change my take your pick tool. They come in each of the 5 new in colors and 3 sizes in each one. And they are very substantial. They are, in fact, just a little challenging to get off the card that they come on, which is a good thing, because that means that they've got some really nice adhesive. I'm just trying to get that tucked up underneath. There we go. And they really are very, very pretty. The colors are true to the colors from the In Color collection. And I just think they're fun. They're bright and they're very substantial. Like I said, they just feel, they're a nice quality. And I'm just adding 3. So card number 1 is done. Card number 2 will be soon. I think that rhinestones would look beautiful on this as well. Really anything, any kind of either neutral or complementary embellishments would look really pretty. And I'm just using 3 of the colors, and they're the copper clay, using that as one of the highlighted colors and getting that close to my sentiment with the hope, don't know if it's going to work or not, but with the hope that that color will come out a little bit if I have an embellishment that has the color on the sentiment and the embellishment colors may work together well, so you can actually see that copper clay just a little bit more. The one that I'm putting on now is the wild wheat, and that is meant to pull out the wild wheat of that second stamp. And then the last one is the boho blue. And boho blue is definitely the color that I've used the most on this card, but I guess that's why it's one of my favorites. Put that down there. And we're almost done. So in the time that we have been talking here and working, we have made 4 cards. Yes, I did do a little prep, but that prep did not take long. And we have 4 cards that are done and could be ready to send out. So if I bring the 4 back in, these are the 4 that we just made. And this is the example that I had done before we got together. So 5 cards, pretty much the same design, and ones that I think would be wonderful to send to friends. This could also be a very nice collection that you could either wrap with ribbon and put into a little box and give as a gift. I think that would be very nice. So I hope you've enjoyed this. I hope that you will try the multiples. And I know that if you do, you will come up with some amazing designs. And again, when you're going through the process of figuring out what you're going to do, like I did with all the examples that I showed you at the beginning, give yourself grace, allow yourself to use paper and ink and to come up with ideas, and realize that more likely than not, you'll be able to use those examples and make them into cards that you will use and send. So until next time, happy multiple stamping and inky hugs.